I just want to qualify. I'm not an expert in environmental justice. I'm going to present a definition of it tonight, but I'm not an expert, and I welcome anyone else to chime in and discuss their understanding of it as well. And the same with zero waste and the initiative around that. I'm going on my own personal journey to reduce my waste, and zero waste is a concept. And so let me jump into my presentation, and then I'd like to just say, if we can kind of make it a dialogue as we go. Like I said, I'm not the resident expert. I'm kind of a generalist in many things. So I know a lot. I know a little bit about a lot of things. So yeah, I introduced the topic, but the first thing I'll talk about, what is environmental injustice, and it's really that the term environmental racism is the term that is a little bit more kind of blunt, and it refers to the way in which minority group neighborhoods, or mostly minority group neighborhoods populated primarily with people of color and members of a, they make less money as a group, they have less wealth, and they're burdened with a disproportionate number of hazards, including toxic waste facilities, garbage dumps, as we're going to talk about tonight, other sources of environmental pollution like I-95, and foul odors that lowers the quality of life. And there's a couple of examples I put here at the local and national and global level. We're going to talk about the incinerator at Chester City. Nationally, we've heard about the Louisiana Delta chemical factory, Mecca, known as Cancer Alley. And globally, Venezuela, has kind of like an oil mess that has just been kind of left and fought in the courts for generations. And there's an indigenous group of folks that live there that are, their way of life has been forever altered because of that. And if folks have other examples, I'd welcome you to go ahead and you can post them in the chat, or just say them out loud, because I'm not sure I can see the hand raising. But if anyone else has any other examples of what they consider environmental racism, please just chime it up there. So here's an example. I'm going to talk a little bit about where it came from, how it existed. What does it mean? What do you mean by systemic? And this is one example of how systemic racism got built into our systems. And I'm going to try to get to how it was built into like a community like Chester City, and why they have all these hazardous industrial complexes there, including our trash getting placed there and burned. But we had this thing called redlining. Folks probably know about this. Started back in the 1930s. There was this homeowners loan corporation that was a government agency that mapped out major cities across the United States, and they gave this information to lenders as a guidance of where they should lend and where they shouldn't lend. And this is the actual grades they gave. They gave from best to hazardous, and the red areas are listed as a hazardous. And what that did was the folks that lived in those red areas is where the banks wouldn't lend, and then the banks, of course, wouldn't lend to minorities in the areas that are called best and still desirable. And so they were kind of relegated to these, as they call it, hazardous communities, where industrial facilities were placed in. And that kind of set the system in place, if you will, as to where those facilities were located, and kind of lock people into these systemic issues around health and wealth. So it reduced their economic wealth and impacted where these polluting industries were built. And this is Philadelphia, and it happened in every not even major city, every city in the U.S., including Chester City and Lehigh, Bethlehem, Pittsburgh, wherever there was a city, they redlined it for banks to be able to know where to, kind of protect the wealth of the ruling class, if you will. So that was, learning, to actually see it on paper. And I'll just, as a highlight, this one down here, this red area here, this is where I lived the first 8 years of my life. But I guess my parents were fortunate enough to be able to move to Havertown when I was 8. And but yeah, I did spend some time in that little red area. So the impacts or the residual impacts and generational impacts really is it led to it created the current neighborhood characteristics, including increased minority presence, higher poverty rates, and greater social vulnerabilities. Um, Indicators of population health were impacted, poor mental health, and even lower life expectancy at birth were impacted by it. And then more recently, there's a statistically significant association between the redlining that had occurred across the United States and pre-existing conditions for heightened risk of morbidity in COVID-19 patients. So even the pandemic that struck our world, the folks that were subject to redline or impacted from that, it had a direct impact on their ability to fight off this disease called COVID-19. So in Chester City, I'm going to introduce this trash burning plant. This is the largest trash burning plant in the United States. In addition to that, it's the Cobanta plant. There's a sewage sludge incinerator. There's multiple chemical plants. There's toxic waste sites, and then of course there's I-95 that cuts right through it as well. But this incinerator burns 3,500 tons of trash a day. Only 1.5% of that trash is from Chester City, and most DelCo communities, not all of them, but most, send their trash to Chester to be burned, and that's about 30% of that total that occurs there is from DelCo, and I think another 30% is from Philadelphia. So the bulk of it's from those two communities, but they also get it from New York City, Maryland, New Jersey, and other areas as well. The asthma rates in Chester are 3 times the state average, and actually Pennsylvania has a high average overall nationally already, but the asthma rates in Chester City are much higher. And this was a kind of a huge statistic. 38% of the children in Chester have asthma. So there's, you can see the impacts of the systemic environmental injustice is just impacting the people that live there. So that brings us to zero waste and what this is. So it's a framework to help guide decisions on systemic decisions. Really, it's really built for systemic decisions. But I'm going to talk in a minute about how to apply it to your own life a little bit. But it's this framework that municipalities and waste authorities can use to start to rethink waste and how to deal with it to reduce the impacts on the environment and human health as well. So it can be part of an overall approach to systemic changes. It promotes a circular economy and should be or could be adopted as a strategy to eliminate incineration. Right? If you go down this hierarchy, and I'll just touch on each of them briefly. But rethink, redesign. This kind of starts at the core. The products that we manufacture, the packaging that they go with. Kind of rethinking them from the get-go and building them, from sustainable products. Could be even the products that we source are done sustainably or not. But it's really kind of rethinking it at the source. So when you think, well, that's kind of out of our hands to do, but I'll, again, I'm going to relate a little bit of these to personal. Reduce is fairly straightforward. You waste less food, only buy what you need. And that goes through electronics and everything. It's just, you don't always have to buy as much as we buy, I guess. So just reduce the use. And reuse, kind of a straightforward one, right? You reuse your bags, reuse as many things as you can. Recycle and compost. I'm a big advocate for home composting, and I hope we see more of that opportunity in our communities as well. Material recovery is an interesting one as well, right? So there's ways to recover the materials and not incinerate them or throw them into the dump. And then residuals management is kind of the last piece where you try to treat it and stabilize it before it gets landfilled, so that it doesn't or it doesn't end up being toxic to human health in the end. And then, of course, what they say is unacceptable is incineration and what's called waste to energy are not acceptable practices in a zero waste hierarchy. And burning waste does just, it does put it into the air. It's not, it doesn't just disappear. Particulate matter gets put into the air, and other toxins go into the air. So there's it's not a clean method by any means. And so here's I just put up some ideas: rethink, redesign. So using recycled or sustainably harvested natural resources. The sharing economy is an example of rethinking. You hear about some people aren't buying cars anymore. They're using car share services or Zipcar. This is one example of this sharing economy. Or if you need a tool, there's groups that share tools, so not everyone has to buy all the newest and latest tools that they use once every 2 years. Reducing is optimizing the systems to reduce waste. And I'll just say, we waste as a society. I'm not sure what the percentage is, but a large percentage of the food that is produced in our country ends up as waste. And so reducing the amount of food we buy, only buying what we need, and maybe buying it as you need it, so it doesn't go to sour is another way. So food's a big one, but it kind of goes across the spectrum. Reuse, repair products that can still be useful. We have a really old, I guess, blue recycle bin for Haverford Township that was, they get beat up because they get thrown by the collectors on the ground. And these bins, my bin had a crack that kind of went jagged all like 2/3 of the way around it, and it clearly needed to be replaced, but we didn't. We glued it back into place, and it actually looks kind of cool now with a zigzag across. But another example of figure out how to fix stuff, reuse them, so that they this refurbished recycle bin, I'm sure my wife will get another 20 years out of it or so. So anyway, yeah, eliminate one-time use products as part of how you do things. Recycling, compost. I love the recycle composting at home. Provides awesome nutrition for the gardens. There is some tricks around it. You got to make sure you have the right mix of ingredients to get a really good compost pile. And we need to change some, I think, policies or statutes within Haverford too to allow more of this. But there's also the ability to sign up for compost or pickups as well. There's some pilots for that. Materials recovery, electronics waste collection we just had in Haverford this past week. That was awesome to see. I just started using this process or this service called Rabbit Recycling, and I did so residuals management. I did a self waste inventory, and that's interesting when you count when you itemize all the things that you throw away to see what opportunities you have. Because I thought we were pretty good at waste management, and my wife and I, there's two of us, and we were down to about 1 kitchen bag of waste per week that we threw out. And when I did my inventory, I found out it was primarily food containers that couldn't go into the municipal recycling. So plastic bags for chips or what wrapped your meats or fish or vegetables, those were all non-recyclable. But Rabbit Recycling has a market for those, and they take them all. So now I'm washing all my trash. It's really funny. In my drain board after dinner, if we will have washed dishes and washed food containers, so that we remove all of any residual food product from the waste, so we can get recycled. They take styrofoam, you name it, and that's kind of reduced. Oh, and tissues. So I'll tell a few more gross stories. I compost my tissues. I know that sounds gross, but if you're not sick, that works. So that was like my two big things was tissues and from blowing my nose and my food products. So I got rid of most of that. And I think we're down to we'll see. We've been using it for a few weeks now, but I think we're probably going to be down to maybe 1 bag a month. And since there's no organics in it, it doesn't smell. And so anyway, we're working through that. We have a dog. This sounds gross too, but we flush the poop down the toilet so it doesn't end up in the waste as well. So just taking like personal responsibility and accountability for all our own personal waste really is rewarding if you want to work at it. So there's some of the things that you can do at that level. So I'll end it with this one, and then we'll have a discussion about the topic and answer questions. And really, I'd like to hear what other people's ideas are on how they reduce waste. But let's talk about systemic change, because that's really where I believe, you know, personal change is important because it brings awareness to topics. And so I strive to do it in my own life and then try to make systemic changes. And so this is the piece where we try to figure out how to make systemic changes. So there's an email address here called public comment at DCSWA. That's the Delaware County Solid Waste Authority.net. And so you can make public comments to them about the incinerator in Chester and let them know that you prefer that they didn't do that. We didn't burn trash in Chester. And there's some bullet points here that talks about some of the reasons, but you know, please put your personal story in there as well. But you know, I know the Chester residents do not want to be the county and region's waste burning capital. There's a group of active residents that have made that known. Trash incineration and dumping the ash in landfills is worse for human health. I've looked at life cycle analysis, and this is a true statement. It's worse for human health and the environment than using landfills directly, but zero waste is kind of what we need to do first, right? We need to go down that hierarchy and see how we can, you know, reduce the amount of waste that we have to manage in the solid waste stream. So there's a number of examples that are here as well, right? Save as you throw, curbside composting, single-use bans, and more. But also, you know, be curious. Learn about your community's waste management practice. Ask questions and see, you know, where action can be taken to improve it. So I could go on about waste management, and I'm sure some other folks on the call probably know a lot more about it than me, but I'll pause there and I'll take questions or just, you know, more conversation about the topic shown. I like to learn from others as well. Like I said, I'm not the expert on all these topics, but be glad to hear from other folks.
Thanks, Noel. So I'll keep an eye on the chat, but if somebody wants to speak up and ask a question, jump right in there.
I have a question, Noel. So I also live in Havertown. Noel, do you know what happens with our, you know, what we flush down the toilet? I don't know what to call that. I mean, you mentioned something about the sewage incinerator. What happens to ours?
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know if ours gets treated or burned. I'm not sure where the cutoff is, so that's a good question. I know there is one water authority that burns the sludge in Chester City, and that's a problem too. I don't know if that's a good question. I need to go find out about that. I don't know if ours is part of that or if it goes to a treatment plant and then, you know, the water put back into the system and the sludge removed.
So I can answer that question for Lower Merion if anybody's interested.
Yes, please.
Lower Merion has a contract with Philadelphia, and all of our sewage goes to Philadelphia and it's treated there. So all the water is treated so that it produces water for drinking, and all the solid waste goes into a managed methane producing system. And then from there, the solid waste is no longer producing methane or toxic gases and goes to landfill. So it's one of the most efficient plants in the nation. So that's where that's going.
I love that. Thank you for that.
So if you live in Lower Merion and you don't compost, use your garbage disposal.
Yeah, that's a good tip too. Yep, you can definitely use your garbage disposal to eliminate sending stuff to the incinerator.
Noel, I've brought this up before. I'm thinking back when I was a child, 5, 6 years old in the 50s, and before the advent of single-use plastics, and going with my mother to the store and thinking how things were packaged. It was either glass or cardboard.
Mhm.
There was no plastic wrap. There was no those shells or stuff like that, plastic bags. And I'm thinking, okay, it may not have the perceived convenience in some cases, but we certainly were able to buy frozen food, fresh food, meat, without having all this stuff on us. And okay, they say the sanitation is enhanced by having plastic wrap. Well, okay, maybe in some situations you could need something like that, but what do you think?
I agree 100%. I think about that sometimes as well. As like, we were able to live pretty fine, pretty good without plastics for one-time use plastics. I'm saying plastics has its place in different areas, but yeah, one-time use plastics are definitely not necessary. But we've kind of our society has kind of accepted waste as okay, and so that brought on the advent of one-time plastics because it was the cheaper solution, right, for companies to build, put their products out in plastic. And it's just exploded. In fact, it's still exploding. The growth in one-time use plastics it's growing in double digits still today because it's so much lighter and cheaper to produce than glass or cans or more sustainable packaging. Yeah.
I've heard that for durable goods like cars and appliances in Germany, there's actually now an added charge when you purchase these things that the company will be responsible for the disposal.
Yeah.
That durable good.
And so Dan brings up an excellent point, Noel, about the idea of manufacturers and producers taking responsibility for the products that they sell, right?
Yeah.
And so the things that you talked about are great. And I look at our community that's on this call, and I think these are people that really care and would probably be willing to go through all those steps, right? And sign up with Rabbit and make sure that they dispose of and consume as little as possible. But we're the minority. We are so the minority. And so most people are not going to do that. And so there's conversation about the fact that the responsibility needs to go back to the manufacturer. So that's exactly what Dan was talking about. But I heard it in relation to plastic bottles specifically, that manufacturers of water and soda bottles need to be responsible for recycling their product. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I know there's there. Oh, go ahead, Joey Baxter. You want to say something on that? Mm-hmm.
I have a comment on another topic, so why don't you address the comment?
Yeah, sure. I know there's a movement to do just that, but it's a tough. In the United States, it's really tough for sure because of the political power of corporations over the individual in the U.S. So that's a really hard to get that change. But I personally agree with it 100% that that's probably the most effective solution is to put the accountability right back on the manufacturers for the disposal of them.
The deposit laws partly do that. Like in Massachusetts, I know that you get plastic soda and there's a deposit, and it was done, I think, originally to get them off the highways, and it cut down on that kind of litter enormously. I don't know whether it gets recycled or not. Probably. I mean, you take them back and put them in a machine at the grocery stores.
Yeah, I think what Courtney was probably referring to is maybe a surcharge that the manufacturers would have to pay
Right.
that would be used to recycle their products and bring them back into the into the usable stream. So like plastics recycling is even a misnomer too, because yeah, a lot of plastics can be recycled, but typically they're only recycled one time and then they end up in the landfill. So that's not really a circular economy. Like like an aluminum can be recycled infinite times, so it's truly cyclical. But even recycling plastics got its limited. You still got to go back to reducing it and not producing it in the first place. But
And then there's the impact of the recycling of the grocery plastic bags, single use. The
Yeah.
majority of them are being put into pellets that are then going to the waste to energy plants to support the burning of the waste, which just means the plastic's going into the air for us all to breathe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a complex problem for sure, and there's not a one great solution, except choosing to use reusable bags is one, and we could legislate the heck out of that, and that would really work. All I got to do is put a price on plastic bags at the counter, and they would reduce dramatically very quickly.
Could I add something here? This is Ruth Ann. I am avoiding plastic because I learned how toxic it is to recycle it, that it's a very polluting process to even recycle it.
Mhm.
So avoiding plastic completely is a more realistic way to have zero waste. There is a website called Plastic Free Living.
And Ruth Ann, it's really hard. And if you have any tips for folks, that would be great, because we try to do the same. And yeah, it's hard and sometimes more expensive.
My
but
best tip is to join a cooperative
Yeah.
where you buy everything in bulk and bring your own containers.
Mhm.
I put in the comments, I wish we had a training program on how to start a local cooperative and how to manage a local co-op, because we could have many small cooperatives and reduce our waste by having the basics, shampoo and soap and dry goods
Mhm.
that would be plastic free.
Yeah, thank you.
So we've switched to bar soaps and bar shampoos that are wrapped in paper. They last a long time. We found laundry soaps that come in a cardboard package that have no water, that just a little sheet of soap that you can throw in. So that's a lot less carbon in transport too. The thing that struck me when you all were talking back and forth was that one of the things that's been happening recently that we're up against, and I think just really raising our voices about this, is that the fossil fuel industries are feeling the wonderful job we're doing with pressure. And so they're realizing that they will not be selling as much fuel to burn. And so they are really pushing plastics because they want to pull the same amount of stuff out of the ground, and the methane gas plants, now they want to go to these cracker plants and make those into plastics. So they're seeing that as their savior, as their next business.
Absolutely.
So and there's a lot of propaganda that is happening around that. That's kind of the same playbook that they refined. So it's just something to be aware of, and just listen for it and reframe it when you hear it out there.
Yep, thank you. And Joy, we have to get back to you. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to let people know of a system. I don't have an opinion on it either way, but it's just something to think about. I went to a presentation from Eco Hub. They're trying to put something in Philadelphia where the old refinery was. And the idea is everything is a single stream. All the food waste, all the recycling, everything goes together. and they're claiming that they can sort it and put it to better use minimally. I always think of they are saying they don't incinerate, but what they do is they have a different process for that, but it more efficiently converts things to gas. So it's still doing that. But the idea that it wouldn't solve the plastics problem, but it would streamline our waste so more possibly would get properly reused. So they are pushing for this in Philadelphia, and obviously they're open to places to do it for other communities. I think their limitation is they need a very big area to do this because they do everything actually inside buildings. So if you can imagine all of Philadelphia's trash coming to one area, that's why they need the big refinery site. So there's not that many places and they also said it smells. So I think that's the limitation for expanding that in this area. We're touting that since it's in Philadelphia, for the Philadelphia trash, it would, reduce transport. But just letting people know of this concept.
Thank you. Bill Cosens, do you have a comment?
Yeah, this is back on the issue of the recycling of plastics. My understanding is there's very little market for the plastic, largely due to the fact that the virgin plastic from natural gas and petroleum is actually cheaper to produce than trying to take the variety of different plastics and sort them out and then run the chemical processes to make them into something that can actually be reused again. So cost is a big thing that deters there from really being a market for those plastics, even where you do have, like Massachusetts or Maine, where there's a fee or there's a forced, you pay an additional nickel or dime or whatever it is to give you an incentive to return them. Even when they get returned, there isn't a market for the reuse because the virgin plastic is so cheap.
I guess that kind of brings up a philosophical question, like why is it that the cheapest method is supposed to be the method we always choose, right?
Absolutely.
Why does cost have to decide what we do with our waste? Why not make
Well,
Especially when the hidden costs aren't present.
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna say, that's a funny question from a climate lobby member, because what we know is that if you internalize the costs, then they're not the cheapest.
That's right.
They're only the cheapest because somebody else is paying.
Yep.
Somebody wrote a comment in the chat called Mother's Compost Service.
Yeah, we're using that.
What can
We
you
are
tell?
using that. Yeah. Yeah, curbside pickup.
Somebody was talking about co-ops. I went to the co-op, the Green Street Co-op, I think the name of it is, in Chestnut Hill, and there's, well, maybe 2 branches there. Anyway, they use these bags for produce that are compostable. So that there are alternatives to a lot of things. They're probably more expensive than plastic in the short run.
One of the things I'll mention about compostable items is that there are some compostable items that you can put in your backyard composter. And then there's some compostable items that say compostable on the bottom of them, but they are only compostable in a industrial.
So this says certified compostable for both commercial facilities and backyard composting. But, and it says, commercial facilities may not exist in your area, check locally. But this could be
Okay,
put in your own
that's great.
compost pile.
Thanks.
My son works with this process of developing composting facilities at different locations. And he's just put one in for a small camp. He worked to develop the one at Pendle Hill. And he said that if you don't include manure and bring it up to a certain temperature, even in your backyard, it will not dissolve that compostable plastic. That compostable plastic dissolves at a very high temperature that most people's backyards won't get to unless it's covered with black plastic and the sun beats on it regularly. And then you have to remove the plastic to make sure it doesn't mold. And it's quite complicated to get compost that hot unless you use manure. So it would be interesting to have a home composting workshop sometime, and or a neighborhood composting workshop. I've seen neighborhood gardens that have a little composting section, one for the animal waste and one for food scraps, and they actually have town employees that help maintain it.
I'll plug in Haverford Township. We are now, the township is sponsoring compost bins. And in order to get a compost bin, so the compost bins are $25, backyard compost. In order to get that, you have to go through a training. I will put the link to that training for the backyard composting. That was actually done by Gwen Nolan, who runs Mother Compost. All the composting pickup services are basically the same price. They're $18 for a pickup every 2 weeks. I will also put a link to all those services that are available throughout Philadelphia area.
Thanks, Joy.
So I want to argue with that lady's son, but the compostable bags that I'm buying for my compost and the other one for my kitchen bin, I don't know what's happening with the kitchen bin because it goes with the trash, which ends up in the Plymouth meeting waste to energy that's serving Lower Merion Township. But the compost bags I'm putting in my compost aren't coming out the bottom. So it's a black composter, bought it for $50 in the township. Lower Merion Township is still selling it, not as cheap as Havertown, but I don't know about training.
Thanks, Dan. Joy, is the Havertown compost bin offered just for Havertown residents?
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I arranged for it, so I have the source. If Lower Merion wants to get a cheaper source, be happy to share the source.
Thank you. There's something in the chat about a Facebook Buy Nothing group, which is a great way to share resources. I also use Nextdoor, and OfferUp is another online thing that lets you post things that you can give away or sell. And so for repurposing, Noel, which you talked about, there are lots of resources for doing that. Our kids came from Portland, Oregon, and there was a robust Buy Nothing program out there. It's less so here. I'm not sure why.
The one for Lower Merion has dissolved down into about 20 different communities because it's been so successful and so active. I only share now with Ardmore Wynwood.
Okay, Dan, that's great to hear.
There's another one that's just started, which is Buy Nothing Mainline. So it's very small right now, but it'll grow too.
Great, thank you.
Courtney, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely, Steve.
Sure. Noel, one of the things that I heard was that the agreements that the townships have with the incinerator is that if they don't send the incinerator enough trash, they penalize the townships, and it's a monetary penalty.
Yeah.
You know if that's true or not?
Yeah, I think the way that the contract is written, first of all, the contract is with the county, not the municipality. So I think the municipalities are obligated to send their waste to the, I guess, a transfer station that the county runs. And then the county manages delivering the waste, and they have a contract with Covanta. And you're correct in that there's a guaranteed minimum. And so that means there's currently in the current contract, there's a disincentive to reduce our waste, because if we reduce our waste and send them less, we still pay for the minimum. And so that's problematic in that we have a financial incentive to, there is no financial incentive to reduce waste. Yeah. And so that's one of the things that we're asking the county, from different angles to reevaluate, what we're doing with the waste, and they're doing that, but they probably need to hear more voices to say, yeah, we agree, this is not acceptable, we should be looking at other avenues, and waste reduction should be the top of the list. So yeah,
Thanks, Noel. Gina was talking about vermicompost, and we'd like some more information on that. Gina, if you're available and can share a little bit about what that is.
Sure. Would you like me to share now?
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. I'm actually outside doing my gardening, trying to reduce my waste in plastic bags. So it's just this little, and if you can see it, it's literally tracks, trays.
Oh, with worms. With worms?
Worms. Yep.
Oh,
yep.
got it.
Yeah. Yep. So it's through Uncle Jim's Worm Farm, and they're stackable trays. I actually had it inside one year, and there's no odor, and it's very efficient in terms of small space composting. So if anybody's interested in that, and I wrote in the chat what you can compost. I don't think you can compost any of the plastic, but possibly if it's the, compostable plastic.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you.
Sure.
Good luck with that. That's cool. Do you have to bring it in every winter so the worms don't die?
We did have to buy new worms this year, but yes, one year I covered it and insulated it, and it was fine. Because they do produce heat while they're breaking down food. So there's definitely a temperature range, and they will freeze and they will fry. So both ends of the spectrum.
Okay. And
Yeah.
you can bring it inside and leave it inside during the colder months, and it will continue. You continue to feed it, and it will continue to compost, right?
You could leave it inside all year round. I just don't have enough room. I think I'm going to put it in my basement. My basement's pretty empty for next year during the winter.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Everybody order are they red wrigglers? Is that what you?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Order your red wrigglers now. It's not too late. Joy also posted a link to video compost training. Thank you, Joy.
I would encourage everybody to, if they can, I've never done it myself, but if they can copy the chat, there's so many good references in this night's chat.
And what I can do is I can send out a copy of the chat. It's kind of hard to read, but I can send out a copy of the chat to the mainline PA-IPL list that I have, which is different than the big list that they keep at PA-IPL. I just keep the little mainline list. So
I would encourage other people to be the crazy neighbor that I am, so I don't feel alone. One of the things I'm going to do tonight is go walking my neighborhood for metal, I know I had a really good day last Wednesday night, but I think I got in my neighborhood of like 3 streets, and I had to do a lot of back and forth walking. I think I picked up about 100 pounds of metal. And there's just no reason we should be throwing out metal. And I don't know how they do it for the incinerator. I mean, I'm hoping they're putting a magnet over things beforehand. But like, you know, the things that are not magnetic, you know, obviously metal doesn't burn. So, you know, it's going to be this big toxic mess at the end of it. So it's just not a good way to do it.
The Covanta does have very large magnets that pull out the ferrous metals. Chuck and I visited it about 3-4 years ago. There's this separate ash pile and this pile of reclaimed metal that often, Chuck, was it reclaimed from the burned material or beforehand, do you think?
I thought it was reclaimed before.
Yeah, so they do make an effort
And
to that extent.
And so, crazy neighbor Joy Baxter, where are you finding this metal?
So I promised my family I will not open garbage cans. So it's like, you know, big stuff, you know, that's left out. You know, I like there were huge like bed rails and that type of thing. And
So what do you do with them?
I take it and just scrap, and I get paid for it.
Oh. Gee, that could pay for buying the new Ford F-150 EV.
Well, I know. So luckily I've been able to make enough. At both times I've gone, I've gotten about $40, but my minivan is been full.
Good for you. Thank you.
Noel, I have a question. Is the Plymouth Meeting Covanta plant is waste to energy.
Yeah.
And I know there's like 8 different plants in Covanta and Chester. Are they all waste to energy, or is there something that's just incineration?
Well, the incinerator that burns the trash, they do produce energy. Yes, it's similar to the one in Plymouth in that regard. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
but for some reason, they don't have the same pollution controls in Chester City than Plymouth has, and I don't know why. They say it's too expensive to put them in now, and because of the age of the plant, I think it's grandfathered, and so it's. The challenge is they're not doing anything wrong or illegal. It's following EPA guidelines, and it's just the system. Again, you go back to the system that we have in place allows it. So it's a complex, tough problem to solve. Yeah, but it is similar in that it's waste to it does produce energy, and yeah, but it does pollute more than the Plymouth one. Mm-hmm.
Does the EPA actually have any guidelines anymore after the last 4 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds, I mean, I'm guessing that it's technically possible to do waste to energy. I mean, Copenhagen has a waste to energy plant with a little ski slope on the outside, right in the center of their downtown. I don't think it's a poor neighborhood that suffers from environmental justice problems. I think they must have put in place the technology to clean up whatever exhaust is coming out.
Yeah,
But-
I mean, I don't know the full answer to that. I know that there's more that they could do, but
Well,
I know that they're also following the law in what they're doing. Yeah.
and no
Yeah.
more.
Janice, did you have a question? Janice Bourne? No? Okay.
No, I was on with the League of Women Voters on immigration issues, and that went until 10 after 8. So I didn't get here when your meeting started. So I came in.
Welcome. Glad you're here.
Uh,
Anybody else?
I think Phyllis has a question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, I have a question for you. How good do you think that waste energy really is? Does it really create energy, or is this just another one of the greenwashing?
Yeah, it's really not an effective or efficient or cost-effective way to produce energy. No, it's yeah, you'd be better off not producing that energy. Yeah, and there's other ways to produce energy from waste, but not burning it. You know, I mean, I know there's some biodigesters and things like that, but no, it's not. It's not a very efficient way, and it's highly polluting. So, yeah, I don't know if it's considered renewable energy. That's a good question.
It's
That,
it's definitely
is.
part of the Pennsylvania Alternative Energy Standard. Unlike other states, we call ours alternative energy
gotcha.
and not renewable energy. So we have a whole bunch of things in there that are very polluting.
Yeah.
But that's part of anything beside the typical, which is also has expired this month, and it's going to stay at an incredibly low rate.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have from my presentation I gave some time ago, in Germany and Denmark, energy from
You're on mute, Daniel.
Dan, we can't hear you.
you go.
There you go.
All right, now here I am. All right, don't hit the space bar when it's unmuted. All right. I'm looking at my old slide here. Germany and Denmark consume 35 and 52% of their energy is from energy from waste. Denmark actually is buying trash from other countries, burn in their incinerator. Apparently it claims to have the cleanest emissions, which exceed the goals set in the 1997 Kyoto Protocol. However, it's been accused of course, contributing to carbon dioxide, even though it is clean emissions relative to our Covanta. So, no, the Danes apparently have for decades been using trash for energy, and the Germans are not far behind.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
This is Ruth Ann again. I was in a webinar a couple years ago when they were discussing a brand new incinerator around the Beltway. I'm not sure if it was Tacoma Park or College Park over there in Maryland. And they showed the statistics on this. It was very expensive to build, but it was so hot that they were able to just incinerate things without having much waste and without having much smoke. And they were using the heat. I can't remember all the details, but I know there are some good examples here in the United States of this extremely efficient incinerator process. And the question is, can we look at those good examples, and would we choose that instead of continuing with these very wasteful, toxic incinerators?
Well, the market won't choose it. It'll have to be the government that makes it financially attractive to go this route.
I mean, in incinerating, you're going to be creating the carbon dioxide, even if it's completely cleaned, and so in the incinerator companies say, including Covanta, say, well, it's better for the environment compared to landfilling, but they're not comparing it to landfilling with methane capture. And so it's not, I put in the chat that Project Drawdown has waste energy as a solution with regrets. So it is a kind of a controversial area, and it's understandable that there's people are not necessarily here, but there's even environmentally conscious people can be on either side of it. But by reducing waste, we can reduce the problem both ways.
Right.
Yeah, and that's part of the challenge of having, someone mentioned Denmark's buying waste. So there's an incentive to waste because there's a marketplace to burn it. And so it's actually promoting more waste. Yeah.
That's right.
Friends, I want to honor our time together. I want to give great thanks to Noel Smyth for being with us tonight, for generating this conversation. I want to thank you all for caring enough to show up and think about practical, thoughtful, and creative ways to be better stewards. And what I'd really like to do is close us in prayer. So if you'll join me in prayer. Creator God, you have given us this world, and we need to be good stewards of it. We thank you for crazy neighbors who have us do the right thing. We thank you for conversation like this that lets us find ways to offer creation care for ourselves, for our families, and for our communities. We ask that you bless us and go with us into this endeavor. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Bill.
Bye-bye, Chuck.
Hey, Noel, before you disappear, can I share your PDF that you sent me?
Absolutely. Please do. Yeah.
That would be great. Thanks. I think this generated a lot of good discussion. And I know that, so I've been in some of those meetings, the Chester meetings.
Yeah.
I mean, that is such important work. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, you got it. Part of it is it just got me, I got upset after learning about it. It's like, wait, you're burning my trash in Chester? What are you doing that for? And so I started digging into it, and
So I took environmental theology in seminary, and one of the resources, and I'd have to dig it up, you can look at a map of, say, the Main Line or Eastern Pennsylvania, and you can see where the trash to steam plants are, where mining is taking place, where landfills are. Do you know, along the Main Line, it is pristine. Yeah. Like there's nothing going on there. It's amazing to me.
It's systemic is what it is. Yeah. It's not by accident.
And so my belief is that everything comes back to racism in our country. In our country, yeah. Everything comes back to racism. So we have to, I have to recognize my own racism, which is hard to do when it's implicit. And you say to the fish, how's the water? And the fish says, what water? Well, so I'm swimming in my own racist waters, and I've got to figure out what that is. It's hard. It can be really painful. Yeah. And so that's the starting point. So it's hard to run to that and say, let me do this. Let me get beat up because I'm not saying the right thing or thinking the right way as a white person. It's just really hard. Yeah. And they're doing great work. I'm blanking on the woman's name who is such a fireball in that. Oh my gosh. Oh, and Chuck knows her too. Chuck's the one who mentioned her, and that's the reason I signed up to go to that group. She is amazing.
Yeah.
So
she's been fighting this for much of her life. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
She came up to Central Baptist Church to meet with us.
Oh, really?
It's got to be 15, 18 years ago, something like that. And then it seemed like I couldn't get in touch with her for several years. And I don't know whether she left the area for a little while and came back, or just exactly what happened.
Right. Yeah. We came through it. Like I'm in Citizens Climate Lobby, and we are mostly like me and older, like a bunch of, we're many white old people that do this work. And we're starting to try to diversify, and we're getting younger people and people of color. But by and large, when I go to my CCL meetings, it's mostly, looking in the mirror. And I tried several years ago to engage with the Chester community around around climate change. And I spoke to a Reverend in Chester City who worked on environmental causes. And, he was nice, and he spoke to me, and he basically said, yeah, we got too many other issues right now trying to keep clean water and clean air. So climate change is not on our agenda right now. And so, a couple of years later went back and took a different approach and just said, hey, how can we help you? And, we got to come to meet you where you're at. And that's how a couple of chapters, the Chester County chapter and our chapter and DelCo, mobilized to help them. We raised up over $10,000 from a GoFundMe, and I think we're trying to pass resolutions. Haverford didn't pass it, but so we're trying to figure out different ways that we can just support them, and that's how we're engaging with them. Instead of asking for, hey, can you help with this climate change? It's like, how can we help you? Yeah.
Yep. And one of the things I feel like they do that is really good is they engage the college, the students at Sewage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's brilliant. So, all right, well, I will get this material out. Chuck, thanks for everything. Noel, you're the best.
All right, thank you.
Have a good night, and we'll see everybody in a month. And Chuck, you and I will see each other in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
Okay.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.